I am Muslim. I am a democratic socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
You know, it's funny, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and one of the things that we were discussing is that Mamdani, in the latter stages of the campaign, had actually started to moderate himself in terms of his rhetoric. And what's funny is that even the person who is making this case gave the concession that they knew full well that I did not buy into said moderation. And a perfect example of me being 100% right is the speech that Mamdani gave after winning the New York City mayoral election. It actually happened. The socialists defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo, and honestly and genuinely, I am really disappointed in the city of New York, but not surprised. And by the way, the chief architect of Mamdani's campaign, his greatest asset, his greatest ally, is former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who basically ran a campaign that was about nothing for well over a year, and then in the last month, we ran the ads in a previous video, he started actually running decent ads, or at least the PAC supporting him ended up running decent ads. But the thing is that if you drop ads after early voting already started, how can you expect to win? If you start campaigning after 750,000 people already vote, the majority of which already voted for your opponent, then what do you expect the outcome to actually be? So yeah, this is where we're at in the city of New York. Zohran Mamdani will be the mayor come January 1st. The communist revolution has succeeded in my great city, and it's absolutely terrible, and I'm going to explain why and what could have been done in order to prevent this from occurring. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. A mandate for a new kind of politics. A mandate for a city we can afford. And a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that.
So make no mistake about it, November 4th, 2025 was an absolutely devastating night for the Republican Party, for the evil orange man, and while a lot of people on the left wing are trying to make Mamdani the champion of election night, the big winner for the left, in reality, Mamdani did not drive the left to a great victory. What actually happened was the Democrats overall had an absolutely amazing night. We thought that the New Jersey gubernatorial race would be pretty close. Jack Ciattarelli looked poised to at least make it a competitive race over in New Jersey, and Mikey Sherrill was a uniquely bad candidate. She absolutely crushed him in every possible way. Now, of course, we expected Virginia to go to the Democrat, at least the gubernatorial level, and obviously the lieutenant governor would follow suit. But even Jay Jones of I Want to Kill Republicans and Their Children, actually won the attorney general spot, and he won by like 3 points. So it was a convincing victory. Mamdani, if you actually look at his results, was significantly underperforming the rest of the Democratic Party. Governor Andrew Cuomo actually overperformed the polls. The Curtis Sliwa votes that were taken away were far fewer than people expected. A lot of people had Cuomo at around 30% or 34%, depending on the polling. However, I do want to point out they also had Mamdani around 40%, and he, as of right now, is in and around 50%, so that's an overperformance for him as well. But when you compare it to the national performance of the Democratic Party, one of the things you realize is that Mamdani is significantly behind all these other establishment Democrats. So this was a night for the Democrats to get victories. This was a night for them to remember. And by the way, a decent portion of that definitely rests on the shoulders of the Trump administration, essentially fumbling the bag in a bunch of different areas. Obviously, the Epstein files has been a constant nagging thing on the Trump administration for a very long time. And by the way, Trump should release the Epstein files. It's ridiculous that they're not released. But in addition to that, you also have him just undercutting the candidates states that he's trying to support. There was a tunnel project from New Jersey to New York that I believe was already underway, or at least already approved, and Sean Duffy ended up pulling approval for said project as a punishment to New York and New Jersey, and guess what? That was essentially used in order to attack Jack Ciattarelli, who ended up embracing Trump, and Trump embraced him during this gubernatorial run. And if you look at the exit polls, Trump's disapproval is higher than Phil Murphy's disapproval, who is the governor of New Jersey, and the exit poll voters overwhelmingly chose Mikey Sherrill if they disapproved of Trump. Something like 90+% did, and if you compare that to those who chose Jack Ciattarelli, who disapproved of Governor Phil Murphy, that was about 80%, meaning that Mikey Sherrill managed to get 20% of the votes of the people who disapproved of the current Democratic governor. So all around, absolute disaster for the Republican Party. I believe Prop 50 also passed in the state of California. The only silver lining, which by the way is not even a Republican victory, is at least before they do the ranked choice voting, sorting and whatnot, Jacob Frey, who a lot of you say is Jacob Fry, but in reality it's definitely Jacob Frey, trust me, I know better than you, appears to be beating his Islamic socialist candidate that is opposing him, Omar Fatah. And the Jacob Fry Minneapolis election should be instructive to everybody around the country about the issues that actually matter, because the reason Jacob Fry was able to run right at Omar Fatah on the issue of affordability, despite the fact that Fatah was running basically the exact same campaign as Zoran Mamdani, is because Jacob Fry actually did stuff for affordability. Rents are actually lower, as we talked about, in the city of Minneapolis, not because they did rent control or rent stabilization, but because they allowed more apartment buildings. So when you look at a chart of Minneapolis rent, what you see is that adjusted for inflation, people are paying about 80 cents on the dollar compared to what they were paying in 2017, which is a huge change in a positive direction for a guy who's running against a socialist pushing affordability with price control. Not to mention the fact that St. Paul, at this exact same time, actually pushed one of the strictest rent control laws in the entire country. Building ended up collapsing, and despite the fact that they capped rent increases for every building at 3% for all the tenants in the entire city, rents ended up dropping more significantly in Minneapolis rather than St. Paul, who basically ran Mamdani's program, and honestly a more extreme version of Mamdani's program, because that rent control law applied to the entire city. Now again, I'm no big fan of Jacob Fry, Justin Trudeau's weaker, even more bitch-made cousin over in Minneapolis, but facts are facts. When you actually deliver for people in key areas, you get rewarded by the electorate, and even if the ranked choice voting goes away that a lot of people are not predicting it will go, and Omar Fatah ends up somehow pulling out a miracle in the city of Minneapolis, the fact that he got the plurality of the vote in the first vote is speaking to the truth of the matter, that yes, in reality, if you deliver on a key issue like affordability, you will be rewarded for that. But if you look at Governor Andrew Cuomo over in New York City, he's done nothing. And as governor, he signed that ridiculously stupid rent control law that, by the way, the Mamdani types supported. If Mamdani was actually in the state house at the time, he 100% would have voted for. Just shows you that this guy doesn't have a clue. Again, this is the guy who brought us bail reform, so how are you going to run against Zoran Mamdani, who fully embraces it? This is a guy who brought us new rent controls that pull a bunch of units off the market, so how are you going to run against a guy who again is advocating for those very same rent controls? And Andrew Cuomo signed that stupid law, as we talked about in a previous video, because he didn't care. He said he would sign whatever the legislator put on his table.
The agreement is a huge blow to New York's real estate industry and considered a victory for tenants. The new legislation would essentially eliminate the deregulation of rent-stabilized apartments, as well as the ability to significantly hike the rent when a tenant moves out. It also lowers the amount a landlord could hike the rent for building improvements. There's also new protections for all tenants, such as limiting security deposit to 1 month's rent, making unlawful eviction a Class A misdemeanor, eliminating blacklists for rental agencies, and protection against retaliatory evictions.
We've been fighting for 2 decades for some of the laws that will be in the bill.
And while Governor Cuomo has pledged to sign whatever bill eventually makes its way to his desk,
I believe it is a step forward. This is the best bill they can pass. So I will sign it.
And guess what? After the progressive wave invaded the New York State Senate in 2019, you knew they were going to produce something that was absolutely terrible, but Governor Cuomo wanted to be president of the United States, so he just wanted to add things to his list of accomplishments rather than serve the American people.
The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity. For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Fingers bruised from lifting boxes on the warehouse floor, palms calloused from delivery bike handlebars, knuckles scarred with kitchen burns. These are not hands that have been allowed to hold power.
Now look, there is a lot of commentary about how Mamdani's speech is much more angry. He's not smiling anymore.
Scott?
Oh, are you saying he wasn't the unifying voice of a generation that you predicted mere moments ago? Axe, where was the man that you predicted would not slice and dice the... Look, guys, he started his speech by quoting Eugene Debs, who ran for president of the United States 5 times as the Socialist Party of America candidate. He repeatly attacked people in this... No, I know my socialists. I keep a close eye on them. I work here. So here's the thing. He went after everybody that he thinks is a problem. People who own things, people who have businesses. He said an interesting quote, no problem too large for government to solve.
Or too small, important.
And so when you think of the world that way, that every problem, no matter how small or how large, is something for government to do, let me just decipher this for you. Tax increases as far as the eye can see, which means the people who need to provide jobs to the young people that you say need jobs are going to flee as quickly as they possibly can. I think this was a divisive speech, and he clearly sees the world in terms of the people who are oppressing you and the oppressed. And he said the oppressed are now in City Hall.
He's going full mask off, and nobody should be surprised by this. Before his mayoral campaign, this was one of the most angry representatives there were. He wasn't Mr. Nice Guy, as he's been playing throughout this entire campaign, and the mainstream media should have called him out on it. They should have called him out on his defund the police agenda, which again, Andrew Cuomo refused to call for what it was, even though Mamdani's saying that he won't hire any new cops, he will stop police overtime, and then he will divert those funds to a Department of Community Safety, which is a bunch of social workers that will be deployed to address things that law enforcement should be addressing. Guys, this is just defund the police under a different name, and it was never called out by Governor Andrew Cuomo in any significant way. In fact, we never even saw the tapes of Mamdani repeatedly calling for defunding the police.
Are you for defunding the police? Are you for a serious reform that people can see on the ground?
I am in favor of defunding the police.
Now, what pisses me off about this is obviously the fact that I live here. So this is going to impact me because I am a resident of New York City, and I'm not going to abandon my city because in reality, I have family ties. I have other reasons to be here beyond taxation and whatnot. But obviously, these policies are something that has failed in the past. And I am worried that the cutbacks in police, since overtime is the only thing that is driving down crime in the city of New York, are going to have devastating consequences on our city. Now, for all the talk about Mamdani freezing rent for rent-stabilized tenants, which of course will lead to more rent-stabilized units being pulled off the market, which will decrease supply, obviously. It will prevent new building from going into effect, and part of the reason for that is because new buildings typically have to add in some rent-stabilized units, and if you're promising to keep those even more unprofitable, that will be a disaster. He actually has to get approval from the Rent Stabilization Board in order to do so, and some of those appointees aren't going to be termed out as they were appointed under Mayor Eric Adams. But in addition to that, we also have to look at his policy on taxation. He's not going to be able to raise, without approval from Governor Kathy Hochul, the highest earning income tax like he plans, or the corporate tax like he also says that he will do. So again, he's limited in those regards, but where he is completely unchained is on the issue of crime with the NYPD, and those cuts to overtime are going to be an unmitigated disaster. Now, a lot of people say he's going to keep Jessica Tisch, the current police commissioner, who really turned around the police department after Commissioner Caban, who was Adams' first pick, ended up going down for corruption. But in reality, Tisch has said that she is likely not going to stay on as commissioner unless they hire new cops, and Mamdani has pledged to not hire new cops. So that promise that Mamdani made basically at the last debate, at the last minute, isn't really going to hold water, in my opinion, especially if he's not going to do the things to ensure that Commissioner Tisch will actually stay on in that role. So yeah, it's going to be bad in the city of New York for sure. And the thing is, the only thing that will turn people against Mamdani is the issue of crime. If that starts raging out of control, then obviously that's going to hurt him politically, because everything else he could blame on the rate stabilization board. He could blame on the state government for not raising the taxes that he wants. And he has all these built-in excuses for why he's going to fail. But make no mistake about it, through the executive, he will be able to do some damage. And if they create that stupid Department of Community Safety, that is going to be with us for the end of time. It's going to be a disaster in every way, and it's absolutely embarrassing. And again, this is due in large part to the fact that the Democrats completely blew the Republicans out of the water, and Mamdani, who was basically riding the coattails of that, ended up being the beneficiary of that. Now look, a lot of people have pointed out from the exit polls that you had native New Yorkers overwhelmingly vote for Andrew Cuomo, while transplant New Yorkers overwhelmingly voted for Zohran Mamdani. This is the least surprising fact in the history of exit polling at all whatsoever. Maybe the other least surprising thing is that Jewish voters ended up rejecting Mamdani at about a 60% clip. Also, Catholic voters were not about it. Obviously, he ended up winning atheists, and of course, the other category, which includes Muslims, which I don't know why they don't have their own category in this particular poll. But in addition to that, you had the poorest New Yorkers and the wealthiest New Yorkers voting for Andrew Cuomo, while Mamdani had a lock, especially when you get to that upper echelon, the upper middle class, on those particular voters. College education broke down exactly as expected. The only thing that really was surprising was the two flips that we ended up seeing in the exit polling. So if you guys are unaware, Andrew Cuomo actually won the Bronx in the Democratic primary. However, he lost the Bronx overwhelmingly in the general election, and this is because most Bronx voters just voted for the Democrat. In the primary, they voted Cuomo, and the reason they voted for him is because he was recognizable Democrat. But as soon as you get to the general election, they of course flip the script and go with Mamdani. And this, by the way, is the opposite of what we saw with East Asians, specifically in Queens, who in the primary voted for Mamdani, but when he started talking about getting rid of the gifted programs, then they ended up churning on him because they know what that means, because Bill de Blasio tried to do this in order to stop Asian kids from achieving so much. Now look, while there are interesting things in the data, and I will link it in the description of this video for you to check out, the fact of the matter is a loss is a loss is a loss, and New York City definitely lost. And by the way, if Andrew Cuomo would have won, it would have been a less significant loss, but still a loss as well. And I am happy, at least in that one respect, that Andrew Cuomo's political career is absolutely over. But of course, I'm going to leave the question up to you guys out there in the audience. What do you think about this? Is New York the disaster zone? Can it get any worse? I don't think it can. This guy is the worst candidate. Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about madness in the city of New York. Till next time.